I am Nick Bernardo, the host of MyGovWatch Live, the B2G Roundtable. If you're east of the Rocky Mountains here in the US, good afternoon. Good morning to those out west, and hello to anyone joining us from other far-flung corners of the earth or watching online in the distant future. Today is Wednesday, June 22nd, 2022, and this series is brought to you by MyGovWatch.com. MyGovWatch.com is revolutionizing traditional bid notification and matching by providing RFP leads in more than 200 industries using proprietary artificial intelligence at double the rate of free government sites and at a fraction of the cost of legacy websites. The site offers useful add-on services you can read about at MyGovWatch.com. Why settle for just the lead when you can have so much more? Start your 14-day free trial today. So today, our co-host with the co-most is a gentleman I've known for some time who's really, really good at what he does. Mr. Josh Frank of RSM Federal. Hey, Josh.
Hello, Mr. Nick. How are we doing, sir?
Doing great, doing great. So we're going to talk about your background in a moment, Josh, for most of the folks here who may not know who you are. But I understand that you got into government contracting by way of your service in the military as an intelligence officer. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
And what I'm dying to know, any cool stories you can share with us without compromising national security?
Oh my God. All right. So a cool story. Yes, I was, when I was a young first lieutenant in the Army, and I was a military intelligence officer, I was put in charge of a system, which I can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you that it involved a aircraft. We were a downlink for imagery for one of our national assets. And when I first came to the unit, they said the Air Force wants to talk to you. And I go, why does the Air Force want to talk to me? I'm in the Army. And they go, well, one of the assets is an Air Force asset. You need to talk to them. So they said, but you got to go into the actual vehicle, the downlink vehicle. And I go, okay. So I go in there, and my captain, my commander was there at the time. And I'm talking to somebody from the Air Force, and they go, hey, you see this really cool multi-million-dollar van that you're in? And I go, yeah. They said, well, we want you to look to your left. I look to my left, and they go, do you see that joystick? That joystick that's under a piece of glass. You know, it's like the old nuclear code launch, right? You got to flip up the glass box, and then you push the button. And I go, yeah, I see it. And they said, don't you ever touch that button, that joystick. and I'm like, okay. And they go, don't you ever let your service members, don't ever let your platoon touch it. And I go, okay. And of course I go, what the hell does it do? And they're like, well, in an emergency, you can fly the asset. You can actually fly that aircraft with that joystick. And I was like, oh my God. And they said, if you ever touch that joystick, we will come find you and you will disappear. So that's probably one of the good stories I have. I can't tell you what the asset was, can't tell you what the airframe was.
Yeah.
But it was funny. You always talk about cross-service, inter-service, coordination and working together. And that was the first time I had dealt with the Air Force as an Army officer. And it was, yeah, you have that in your vehicle. Don't you ever frickin' touch it. And I just laughed.
So not even rules of engagement for when you might need to touch it?
No, they pretty much said, if I ever had to touch it, somebody's going to die. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether I touch it or not.
Yeah,
No, the rules of engagement were you never engage.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're certainly going to engage today. And for the folks who don't know Josh, I'm just going to go through and read Josh's bio. So Josh is an award-winning business coach, professional speaker, and best-selling author. He's a leading authority on government sales and business acceleration. With 30 years in the government market, he speaks nationally on federal acquisition and business strategy. He specializes in the development and implementation of tactics and strategies required to differentiate, position for, and win government contracts. His training sessions, highly educational and thought-provoking, are consistently rated the top sessions at national conferences and events, including Govology, a good friend of ours also. Managing partner at RSM Federal, Mr. Frank is author of Amazon's #1 bestseller, An Insider's Guide to Winning Government Contracts, Real-World Strategies, Lessons, and Recommendations. So with more than 13.5 billion in government contracts awarded to clients and federal access members, Mr. Frank has been honored with the SBA's award for Veteran Business of the Year, Industry Small Business Advocate of the Year by the Society of American Military Engineers. And in 2021, Josh was inducted into the Government Sales Hall of Fame with the inaugural Lifetime Achievement Award. And I have to admit, I have just become aware of the Government Sales Hall of Fame. So that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, it makes me feel old, Nick.
Yeah.
Lifetime.
Is it right next to the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown?
I wish. Nah.
So Josh serves on multiple boards and is chairman for the Veterans Advocacy Foundation. And he has 2 graduate degrees, including an MBA. So I'm just curious, Josh, before we go further, how did you make the transition from the military to the Govcon trajectory for your career?
When I was a senior captain, I broke my back jumping out of an airplane. Yeah. So you didn't even know that, did you?
Wow.
Yeah. So, I broke I 3 discs exploded on impact. I was at Fort Bragg. I was in the Corps G2. And so, I was just months away from pinning on 04. And the Army said, hey, appreciate all you've done for us, but it is time for you to go. And so I did what most company grade officers do when they leave the service. They become project managers, right? At the time, all I had was an undergraduate degree in English, which if you ever ask me, I'll tell you is the most valuable degree. It is more valuable than my master's in information systems. It's more valuable than my MBA because I can communicate grammatically correct better than most of our colleagues. And from a business owner perspective, crazy. Anyway, so I became a project manager, ran software development teams and all kinds of stuff. Went to various companies. I worked for a lot of small companies. And I worked for large. I was in charge of the Department of Defense for MasterCard Worldwide up in Washington, D.C. And so, for many years after the service, and the service was 20 plus years ago, I did a lot of sales, and I was always the #1 sales guy at every organization that I went to. And I said to myself, I've been capturing how I do this, and I'm a little philosophical, and I said, you know what? I'm going to start my own company. And that was 15 years ago this year. This December is my 15-year anniversary, and my team and I are looking forward to that. But that's how I got in. I have been dealing with government now for over 35 years. So I've been in the market a long time.
Well, and it shows, and it's really fascinating when you consider all the things that you've done in your career, and you certainly have helped me with some things over the years. And what is the #1 challenge? And this would be a primer for some of the folks who are going to be touching on some of these things, but what would you say is the #1 challenge companies face in successfully selling to the government?
Well, I'm going to change your question. I'm going to say, what's the #1 challenge companies have, whether it's government or it's commercial? I'd almost argue it's industry and market. Well, it is industry agnostic, definitely market agnostic. And that is communicating your value. And what I mean by that is, whether it's commercial or federal space, 50% of companies fail, right? If you're looking for the small businesses, if you're 8A, minority, socially disadvantaged, if you're woman-owned, hub zone, veteran, whatever it may be, 50% fail. They don't fail because they don't have good products and services, right? 50% of all companies with a GSA contract, right? Schedule, they fail. 50% of all small, 50% of all large fail. And they have strong product services, but they don't know how to communicate their value. All companies are very good at communicating their solution set, their features, sometimes their benefits, but communicating value. And to give you an example, because I'm all about examples, a company that says, well, you know, our marketing is just fine. And I'll say to them, I'll say, okay, tell me about, give me your elevator pitch. And they'll say, well, we're in the business of providing information technology. We're general construction, office supplies, garden hoses, whatever it may be. And, you know, we're really good at what we do. And, you know, we're woman owned, blah, blah. And I look at them and I go, the way it needs to sound is, you know, we are in the business of providing the following value, define it, to public and private sector. We have over 20 prime and subcontracts, prime contracts, subcontracts that cross, you know, 12 commercial and 7 government organizations. There are numbers, metrics, percentages that, and by the way, this is what we call value mapping, right? How do you communicate your value? You map it. And, you know, when I'm at national events and I'm keynoting a conference and I talk about value mapping and you got to communicate your value, most companies go, oh, wow, this like connects all the dots. So, you know, you don't have to go through the training, but as long as you remember, you communicate your value with numbers, metrics, percentages. As long as you're communicating who you are and what you do using quantifiable and qualifiable metrics, that takes you to the next level. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it strikes me that, and I've heard you say this before, that many companies may incorrectly believe that, you know, just having a certification as a disabled vet or a woman-owned company, that's the value. And it sounds like you're trying to get beyond that and say that that's nice, but, you know, there's more to it than that.
Yes, I think we may talk this a little bit later on, but I will confirm what you just said by making a statement. No company wins contracts because they are small, minority or socially disadvantaged, woman-owned, veteran-owned, service-disabled owned, hub zone. Nobody wins because you are certified with the SBA or the VA. You never win contracts because of that. It's a balancing differentiator. And companies that think they're going to win a bunch of contracts because they got certified, that's a crutch that will literally destroy your sales strategy. Because all it is opening doors. That's all it does. Final thing on this, and I'll let you keep going. Think of it this way, Nick. Let's say your company was a woman-owned small business. You bid on an opportunity. Commercial, government, doesn't matter. 26 companies agree and submit bids, proposals. What is the only thing that all 26 companies have in common? They're all woman-owned.
Right.
After that, when they're reviewing your bid, your proposal, you being a woman-owned small business means absolutely nothing, provides zero value. So yes, socioeconomic statuses are important, but they are not the value of your company, period.
Well, fantastic. And so I want to engage the audience, and I know there's several of you on the line or on this session who I spoke with yesterday or who may have traded emails with me. And, you know, if we did that, we're going to cover your questions. And even if you didn't, we're still going to cover your questions. So the first person I would like to ask to participate is Dan Heckman. And Dan, what I'm going to do is ask, I will turn on your ability to participate. And Daniel, you can turn on your video or you can just use audio if that's your preference, or you can do both, but you should have just gotten prompted that you've been promoted to a panelist. And sometimes this can just take a moment or two.
Hey, how you doing, Nick, Joshua?
Hey.
Hi, Daniel. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, Daniel, it was very interesting that we spoke yesterday, and you sort of briefed me on the topic that you wanted to talk about. So I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I know it had to do with what are some of the things that are unique to government sales that you should be doing, or companies like yours should be doing, to build a pipeline. And so before we get into that area, and maybe you can frame the question the way that you'd like, why don't you tell us all a little bit about what you do in your business?
Yeah, I know. Appreciate it, Nick. So we're an organization. We focus on strategy and process engineering consulting, driving towards automation. We essentially work across many different government agencies, but essentially drive towards lowering labor hours and moving government employees from low to high value work. So we're still working on defining our true value story. I've been working on that before I came across one of your books, Joshua, back in the day, or a little over a while ago. We'd started working on that, but we're still kind of mapping that out and working on some marketing plans. But kind of concurrent with that, Nick, or if I just kind of reframe my question as well.
Yes, go ahead,
Okay.
Please.
Perfect. So concurrent with that, as I'm working on the marketing plan, working on our business development strategy, I come from a background of more commercial sales, more commercial business development. So I understand a lot of the kind of what you were talking about, where value first, things of that nature. But what I'm struggling with coming into the world of B2G is understanding top of funnel actions, KPI actions that actually drive revenue and business development as it falls out. For me, I can understand in the private sector, how many phone calls, how many conferences you visit, how much pipeline you come in, what's the ratios that you can expect and forecasting out, as far as kind of actionable KPI type things, top of funnel, what creates pipeline, what's prospecting look like. And I am from literature and conversations, a lot of what I'm seeing is, you need to start early before the proposals, all those kind of things. But I'm still struggling to find what's actionable items that can be tracked and KPI'd early in the pipeline.
Is that for me, Nick?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So, Dan, do you go by Dan or Daniel?
Whatever you want to call me in my general direction is fine.
Excellent, excellent. Well, with me, it's Josh, but if it's Joshua, it means I'm in trouble, and my mother's yelling at me. So I always ask. So couple things, chain of consciousness. Number one, in the private sector commercial space, they always say it's 5 to 12 touches, gets you a contract. In the government market, it's 12 to 20.
Yeah.
And most salespeople quit after 3 or 4, right? They've emailed, they've called, they left voice messages. It's going to take 20 touches, right? It's always been, that 12 to 20. But if you look at COVID and what COVID's done, and, we're now in this very distributed workforce model, where even governments that are all working from home, you're going to need 20. Okay. So in terms of the delta between private and public sectors, you mentioned something about, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to touch on a couple of things you said. You talked about lowering the labor hours. You're talking about lowering labor hours for government employees. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Eliminating labor activity.
Yeah. And then moving those that remain into more high value activities, right? Okay. One of the most dangerous things that companies go through in terms of the marketing, when a lot of companies look at, okay, I have to communicate what the ROI is, right? What's the return on investment? What's the value? We know in general, saving money is not an ROI that the government is really going to pay attention to. Okay, because it's tax dollars. And if they don't spend it, they don't get that money the following year. So using ROI of, hey, it's going to save you dollars is a very dangerous gamble. Okay. Along those lines, unless you absolutely know for sure that the folks that you're pitching to, the government agency or military command or intelligence community, unless they have said to you, we're looking for innovation, we're looking to cut headcount, we are looking to streamline our organization. Most people in the government are trying to build fiefdoms. They all have their own sandboxes. You may be pitching, hey, we can lower labor hours, and it sounds really good. But what if you're talking to a person whose labor hours are going to get cut? So Dan, there is a danger, and this is not just for you, this is for everybody watching it live today and then eventually on demand. Communicating your value or your ROI as lowering labor hours, cutting FTEs, whatever, is dangerous unless you absolutely know what they're looking to do. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Most companies spend the majority of their time in acquisition phase. Now I'm getting to your answer. Okay? Most companies spend their time in acquisition. And why? Because that's what the counselors for the agencies are telling you. That's what various organizations, profit, nonprofit, mentors, rabbis, consultants, they're all saying to you, hey, you got to go into SAM and you got to set up queries so you see results. If you sell commodity and product, you got to go to divs. That's all the big boys out there in other systems. Hey, you got to use these systems, etc. Most of that is acquisition, unless it's market research and they're looking for, it's like sources sought RFIs, etc. Companies that consistently and successfully win government contracts spend 80% of their time in pre-acquisition. Pre-acquisition is before anything hits the street, which means you're going to 2 to 3 regional or national conferences every year. You are collecting intelligence on the organization. You have identified 3 strategic targets, agencies or military commands, that over the next 12 months, you're building relationships regardless of opportunities that you're seeing out there in the market. So we could talk for hours on all the different pieces I just talked through, right? In terms of the tactics and strategies. But the most important thing I can say to you is focus pre-acquisition. Focus on knowing who buys what you sell, how much do they buy, how often do they buy it, and then target them in order to convince them you're a subject matter expert, for you to collect market intelligence, and you focus pre-acquisition. Any company listening to this, you can bid anything you want out there on SAM or DIBS or any of the other systems. But if you're not focused pre-acquisition, you are not going to accelerate into the market. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think I agree with you that needs to be a focus. A proposal in the acquisition phase should be a byproduct of work you've done up front. And I guess, like I said, since I've kind of breaking into the government space, understanding what that pre-acquisition, it's follow-on kind of deep diving, but that's kind of where I'm wrestling with right now. Is what does that actually look like in the government space? Like you said, 2 to 3 conferences.
Yeah. And one other thing, 90%. Are you a small business, Dan?
We are, correct. Yes.
Okay, 90% of small businesses get their first 3 or 4 major contracts as a subcontractor, which means you need to have a really strong programmatic teaming strategy where you've got 8 to 12 companies in your teaming stable that no matter what opportunity drops in the market, you've got somebody you can either prime and sub, bring people onto your team, or they can bring you onto theirs. So absolutely critical. Programmatic teaming strategy is hands down one of the most important things you can do, in addition to focusing pre-acquisition.
Makes sense.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks.
Fantastic content and great answers, Josh. And Daniel, we appreciate your questions. Any follow-ups to that?
I think I'm good at the moment.
Okay, so please stay with us. And if you cannot, just for everyone who may be listening, you'll always be able to find this and our prior sessions on YouTube at MyGovWatch, or on YouTube by searching MyGovWatch Live. And so the next person I would like to invite to engage with us is someone I spoke with yesterday, Lori Porter. So Lori, I see that you're with us. So what I'm going to do is elevate you to a panelist and ask you to join us.
Hey, by the way, Nick, Lindsay's on this. I know Lindsay. So
Oh, great. So we will definitely get to Lindsay.
excellent. All right.
Hi, Lori. How are you?
I'm great. How are both of you this morning?
Doing just fine. Doing just
Wonderful.
fine. And thank you for joining us. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's from somewhere on the West Coast.
We are in Sacramento, California, the capital of our Golden State.
Well, thank you so much. And Lori, before we get started, for the benefit of anyone who's with us now or maybe listening later, what do you do?
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it. Joshua, I've already enjoyed your comments. They've been fantastic. Really appreciate it, especially focusing on the pre-acquisition stage. So true. And that kind of touches a little bit on where I want to go in my question. But who are we? Porter Co. is a company I founded in 2007. I had a history of a career in media and broadcasting. And the bottom line is we help create market leaders and drive behavior change. We are a full service advertising agency, marketing, media, and brand strategists that help with differentiation and taking complex problems to create simple, streamlined solutions so that people can understand what it very clearly is that we're asking of them and what the benefits of making certain choices and behaviors can be for them. We've been in business for 15 years. We have, we've won a list of all kinds of creative and media awards. We focus in the healthcare sector, travel, tourism, financial. We are just now wading into the government space. We've tried in the past, in all candor. We had, a larger team pre-COVID. We went after it. We had all the boxes ticked. We just didn't get there. And I was listening to your touch. I know what you're saying, the number of touches it takes. I advise clients on this all the time. And yet, when you're going after one of these, it really, forgive me, it just sucks the life out of you. Mm-hmm. It really can, especially for a small business, because a lot of things have to stop in order for that to occur. Business has to continue, and a small business has to really dedicate a lot of resources into this. There's no cut and paste, was what we've learned. Sure, you can have some boilerplates to it that can be adjusted, but it simply takes time. I'm writing one right now, as a matter of fact, as we speak. So my question is, how small organizations like mine win in this process?
That's a great question. First of all, do you have any socioeconomic status? I normally don't ask that question, but based on your industry, I need to ask.
Yeah, we don't. We're women-owned businesses, but we can't claim any disadvantage. We are 100% female-owned and operated.
Okay.
100% of my employees.
Gotcha. Are you certified woman-owned through SBA?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So,
but to your point, that's like the table stake, right?
Yeah, it is and it isn't. And again, this will be one of the first times in a long time that I've asked somebody that question. But you said a couple of things: media broadcasting, brand strategist, healthcare is one of your industries, and the VA is huge, right? About trying to get veterans. And there's like 40 million of them. We're not just talking the service disabled ones. We're talking all the veterans. They are constantly trying to figure out how to get veterans to recognize they have certain resources at the VA. I've been on contracts. I've been an SME for other companies on these type of contracts. One of them was a marketing company. Okay. There is, from my prior discussion with Dan, I would say to you, you should, without a doubt, build relationships with 2 or 3 SDVOSBs. Okay. Now, why? Because 70% of all the contract spend with the VA is going through veteran companies. Okay.
What was the term you just used, Josh?
2 to 3 SDVOSBs in your teaming stable. Was that it?
I think so. The SUSB. I'm not familiar with the term. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Service disabled, veteran owned small business. SDVOSB.
Got it. Thank you.
It's the same as WOSB. It's just
Yeah.
Yeah. So because there is such a massive amount of marketing and brand, specifically for your industry, with the VA, you should build a relationship with 3 of these service-disabled, veteran-owned small companies. Now, some people go, well, what about veteran-owned? Do not. Now, for those that are veteran-owned, they always hate it when I say this, but even though the VA and agencies have percentages for veteran-owned, there is no federal mandate to work with a veteran-owned company, only a service-disabled. Any set aside within the VA that is for SDVOSB means any veteran company can engage. And if it's just veteran owned, well, no, if it's veteran owned, any company can engage. If it's a service disabled, half those veteran companies can't go after it. So if you're going to team with other companies, build a teaming stable,
right?
2, 3 or SDVOSB, make them service disabled, veteran owned. Now there is tons. Ticking boxes is not enough. You've learned that the hard way, right? I mean, just ticking the boxes, have a copy of your capability statement, go talk to the small business office. There's so many different directions I could take this, Lori, but one of them would be, if I were to ask you, okay, not rhetorical, I want to see what answer I get. Don't be bashful. If I were to ask you, what is the number 1 objective, call to action, result, objective you want to get from talking to a small business director at an agency or military command or one of their procurement specialists? What is the one thing you want to ask for? What would you think?
What's the one thing I would ask for? I would want to understand very clearly what their needs are, so that I could determine how I can solve the problems that they are up against.
Excuse me. Absolutely. Now, that's the right answer. The problem is they don't have any money, right? They're not the decision makers. They're just influencers. Some of them are. The number 1 thing you want to do is, after you talk to a small business director, let's say, at some agency, your objective is to get a capability briefing with somebody on the program side.
Got it.
And the way you do that is, after you talk to the small business office, you send I call it a power deck, right? There's capability briefings or, 7, 12 pages, whatever, slides. It's a power deck of 3 to 4 slides. And it's like, this is and it's after you talk to the small business office, because you're going to ask lots of questions about, what are you looking for? Yeah, collecting the challenges, those pain points, stuff that you were talking about. But it's also timeline. So, every time you're talking to a small business office, your number 1 objective is to give a capability briefing to somebody on the program side. Most companies don't get them because they don't follow up with a power deck of 3, 4 slides, because you need to help that small business rep influence the program side to take the meeting. Right. So that's just one tactic of many. Question. Have you read this?
I have not, but I plan to.
It's on Amazon. You don't even have to search my name. Just type government contracts and it'll pop right up. I talk a lot about these tactics and strategies in the book. And so, if you don't get all your questions in here today, at least you can listen to me talk to you through the page.
Thank you. I appreciate this.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm clear about your advice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Lori, and I'm trying to recall our conversation earlier. You were interested in state and local contracts in addition to federal, is that right?
I'm interested in all of it, and I was interested in what the best pathway is to success, candidly. Is it to start on a local level, build to a state level, then go after something on a regional and federal level? Where to put your toe in the water? We've been brought in as a contractor on a statewide piece of business and are performing really well, and that's wonderful, but we're not the prime. So I'm wondering, where will we have the most success? Being in Sacramento, on a local basis, there are a lot of agencies that have similar capabilities to ours that are, it's like fishing in a really small pond for us, if you will.
Sure. And, it goes back to what Josh was saying earlier about pre-acquisition and making sure that what you're doing pre-acquisition is top heavy. And Josh, I wonder if you agree with this statement, or to what extent you agree with it. There is no one way of getting to your end game here. I mean, certainly everything Josh has talked about, I agree with. But Josh, do you agree that there is no one way or one silver bullet, whether it be federal, state, or local, to getting into government contracting? Because that's been my experience.
That's right. I mean, I can agree with that. I do believe there's a baseline, right, of certain things. You have to communicate value. You have to have a teaming stable. You have to focus 80% of your time pre-acquisition. But, each of those have different, there's so many different tools in the toolkit, right? And everybody's got a different toolkit. But no, I agree with you on that, Nick. There are lots of different ways of going through it. Now, Lori, I would say, if I were you, I'm looking at my pipeline. Should I, first of all, no, you don't have to do state, local, then state, then federal. Experience is experience. Past performance is past performance. Does federal have a lot more regulations you have to follow? Oh, yeah, a lot. But that's just education. Companies like yours, you're currently on a contract, you're a sub, right, at the state level, you're doing really well. One of the challenges a lot of companies like yours face is they're a sub, so they don't have real strong relationships with the end user or the client. You need to make sure that whoever your most senior person is on this contract, right, you're building relationships. You're building relationships and collecting intelligence so that maybe they call you instead of your prime the next time they have a requirement. Right. So I would say, you have these contracts already at the state level and commercial. I always say 50% of your increase in revenue is always going to come from existing clients, right? You're going to grow the existing. So why not work on continuing to prime commercial and state and local? And your number one priority on the federal side for the next 12, 18 months is an indirect sales model where you do nothing but subcontract. And so all you're doing focused on the federal side, the government side, is who are 20 large marketing, branding, etc. firms, and build relationships with them. And all of a sudden they start bringing you onto their proposals.
Yeah. We did try that approach a little bit. We just put our finger in, or our toe in the water, haven't dived all in. And we found that two of the agencies that we approached were, thank you, but no thank you, because I think they felt it was competitive. So our approach wasn't quite right. We can be viewed as competitive based on the credentials that we have. And I do understand that.
Yep, absolutely.
So I don't want to take all the time. I do understand other people are on the call, but I want to thank you also for your service. I'm the mother of a brand newly commissioned second lieutenant in the Army. So just graduated West Point. So thank you for your service.
You are welcome, and congrats.
Thank you.
Hey, Lori, just before you go, there's another angle to this. And to what extent are your contracts one-time, scopes of work where you're just doing some things for a client, whether it be government or non-government? And to what extent are they recurring contracts?
The vast majority of our business is all recurring revenue with clients. They're long-term relationships, almost exclusively referral based.
Okay, and so Josh will appreciate this as a former intelligence officer. So one of the things we offer on MyGovWatch is the ability to do open records requests through our site. Are you familiar with the FOIA or open records laws?
Not.
Okay.
I'm really just diving all in.
Yeah, so as it turns out, you have the ability to access, and by the way, you can do this without us, but the reason why people use our site to do it is they're anonymous. You can access copies of contracts, copies of evaluation documents showing how different government agencies evaluated different competitors that you have locally and at the state level. Winning proposals that explain, why the vendor was chosen and all their differentiators. That's all in the public domain. It's available to you. So I would start creating a list of contracts that you're aware of, right? And figuring out how you're going to get at the last iteration of procurement to find out why they picked who they picked, because those documents can also contain information about who were the decision makers at that government agency, whether it be the city of Sacramento or a county or the state government. And then you start to know who you can target. So when you try to do something pre-acquisition between those procurement cycles, you're not asking, do you have a recurring contract for advertising or for destination marketing? You're saying, I'm aware of your contract. I know you had 6 people bid on it last time, and I know you didn't pick based on price, you picked based on service. How's the service been, right? And so it's a totally different conversation.
Totally.
So that's something we could engage with separately, and I just want to encourage you to think about that.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that service.
Absolutely. So we can talk about that offline.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for joining us, Lori, and feel free to stay tuned. So Josh, before we go further, I want to make sure that we take a look at your book. Are you seeing my screen? Are you seeing that I'm on Amazon right now?
No, we're still just seeing your face.
Okay, so let me see if I can switch this or switch the type of share this is. And now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that we came to Amazon, and you held up a copy of the book, and boy, look at this, 324 ratings. And
okay, so this is the wrong version, and somebody's trying to, let's see here. Where does it say? Scroll down. Let's see if there's the newer one.
The newer edition?
Yes, click that one.
My apologies.
No, you're good. You're good. There you go. I saw $280 and I'm like, that's not the right one.
There we go. So I just wanted to make sure people saw this. I know you held up the book. Any other comments, or what was it like writing a book?
Oh my gosh, we could go forever. I've written 2 books and I've co-authored 2 others. They're all #1 bestsellers. Simply having passion. You got to be good at what you do, but having the passion and recognizing you write that you provide real value to the reader, right? Not this BS of, I wrote a book, I'm an expert. Now come to me so I can, and pay me thousands of dollars to help you. No, this book is written, and it was really exciting to do it, to provide my intellectual capital to folks. And so, nobody ever leaves reviews. 324, I've sold over 10,000, but people normally just don't leave reviews. But no, I loved it. Takes forever. Took me 2 years to write it, but because I do have a life outside of being an author. But no, it's if anybody here is interested in government or is in government and hasn't read it, take a look, because reading it, it'll sound like I'm talking to you right now. That's the type of tone of voice I use.
Well,
I ordered 3.
Thank you, Lori.
Well, that's fantastic. And here's the part of our session today where I try to figure out how to come back to the video. So while I'm doing that, I'm just going to go to the next person that we were going to bring in. And before we do that, Josh, I'm curious, and maybe as you answer this question, That'll help me figure out the getting back to the video portion. So what federal trends are taking place in the GovCon market that we need to take into account as a part of an overall GovCon sales strategy?
Oh, all right. So that's a great question. And there's no way that we can talk all of it on in this session. But it's interesting you asked that, because I was the MC for the National Veterans Conference in Orlando SeaWorld, 4 weeks ago, I guess. And I facilitated a panel with the Chief Acquisition Officer for the VA, Mike Parrish, and the Commissioner for all of category management for information technology across the entire federal government, and that's Laura. And I moderated their panel on this exact topic. Couple things. I'm not going to go crazy detail on all of them, but if you want to ask questions. Number one, contracting officers. Contracting officers, they're retiring. Baby boomers are retiring left and right. As an example, the VA is currently down 30 to 35% of its COs. I'm getting very similar response back from various executives in other agencies and military commands. So the one market trend, that 1220 touches, yeah, you're going to have to, because they're a short a third of all their acquisition professionals right now across the whole government. Number two would be another trend would be the small business, the small business community in the Department of Defense. I was moderating a session, and Farouk Mida, who is the director in charge of all small business for the Department of Defense, he looked at all of us and he said, we have lost somewhere between 40 and 50% of the entire small business industrial base across the Department of Defense. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute. This is industry agnostic. Half of all the small companies, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, over the last 10 years have disappeared. Okay, so that's a trend. Why is that happening? We can talk that some other time. Other trend, category management and strategic sourcing. The VA took all of its senior executive. I talked VA because I had a client. VA is just coming top of mind because of a call I had this morning. VA sent all of its senior executives to the GPC conference in DC last week. And they said 90% of all the spend, all the buys, were moving to strategic sourcing and category management. So everybody that relies on credit card, everybody that relies on definitive contracts, single contracts, if you don't know what category management is and you're a product company, or even service, or you don't understand what strategic sourcing is, that is the future of the entire federal space. Cybersecurity is a big trend, CMMC on DoD side, shortage of skilled labor, that's a market trend. Same issue we have commercially, government's having. Supply chain is in chaos, we know that. And then the last two I would say are the Buy America Act and the huge increase in the two-part test for component percentages in products, and then government digitization. I mean, I actually run multiple companies, Nick. One of them is a company that sells product to the VA, right? I'm looking out of my office into the other office, and we're writing millions of dollars in bids right now. All the contracting officers are at home. Many of the decision makers are at home. And so that slows down source selection. It slows down getting a response from them. It makes it more difficult to get a hold of them. So what are the market trends? Those are just a couple of the market trends that are taking place right now.
It's fascinating, and just so much has come through the pipeline with COVID and just all of the changes that have been happening in the economy as a result of it. And I think that's really what you're driving towards, and it's just fascinating to know that these things are happening. And before we go further, I just want to tell everyone who's on the line, if you stay on the line with us, we are absolutely going to ask you, based on the number of people who are asking to participate and who are with us today, you will get your chance in the next 45 minutes. Probably in the next half hour. And so the next person I wanted to invite to join us, and this will be up to you, Misty, but we have Misty Cook with us from Cascade Collections, a company in the accounts receivable management space. So Misty, I would like to invite you to participate as a panelist.
Hello, Misty.
Well, hello, Josh. Thank you so much for your service and for this. This has been very informative. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us, Misty. And so before we get started, can you tell us what you do and a little bit about your company?
Yes, we are a family-owned agency from 1970. We are a collection agency, but we are the collection agency with heart. We are the only agency I know of that actually has positive Google reviews from consumers as well as our clients, because we have a personalized approach to collections. So the benefits, I would say, our value is that we tend to collect more than most agencies because we truly care about what we do.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know when you signed up for this session, you were asking a little bit about how to answer RFPs in an RFP, how to answer questions in an RFP. So I don't want to speak for you. So can we talk about that first? Because that was really fascinating to me when I saw you indicated that on your sign up form.
Yeah, I am finding that as right now, I'm kind of just wading into what I'm seeing now is more time-intensive world of government contract acquisition than I thought. So far in my 10 years here, I've worked on 3 RFPs myself and generated them. And the problem that I always have is RFPs, for the most part, for the government contracts I look at, meaning municipalities for the most part, they're looking for a collection agency to collect traffic tickets and infractions and things like that. Their contract is usually 2 to 5 years. They don't really say what they're looking for, but they have a whole bunch of cut and paste things from a variety of contracts that don't really have anything to do with collections. For instance, they will ask for things like, we need to have a copy of your all of your employee driver's licenses and insurance cards to make sure that they are fully insured. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with collections. They're in our office. They don't drive anywhere. I'm the only one who does. So I'm trying to figure out how to answer the question, but and still meet the need, and yet, still be able to, I guess, to creatively answer the question. Also, we're finding the same thing happens with some other things that maybe they're asking us to do something that we feel is an overstep, that we're not willing to do. We know that we can provide the value. I want to help them see that we have the value, that we can actually give them more return on their investment by working with us if we don't have to do what it is they're asking. So I'm trying to figure out how to answer that.
Absolutely. Great question. And just for the purposes of responding to this, we should assume that this is post-acquisition, meaning the acquisition has already started. So as it turns out, one thing that users of our website are able to do is submit questions through a buyer for an active bid during an active procurement. So right off the bat, you're able to submit questions, but not have your fingerprints on that question. So if you want to politely say, what do driver's licenses have to do with a call center? You can do that. And the question's coming from us. Beyond that, if you're not using our website, you can also use the Q&A process to politely ask that question in some way that you think makes sense. During or prior to the acquisition process, you're able on our site to look, at least in your industry, you're able to look at, the previous iterations of the RFPs and maybe talk to them before the bid comes out and say, hey, I know you were asking about vehicle insurance when you did this RFP in 2018. Are you planning on having that? And at that point, you might be able pre-acquisition to be sort of an advisor, helping them revise their RFP requirements. And by the way, maybe there's things that you can help recommend that make it more easy for your company to win the contract. So those are some things that are available, but I would certainly start by looking at the Q&A process for asking those questions in a polite way. Josh, do you have something to add on that?
I liked your response. And Nick, you already implied it. Misty, you need to get inside the decision cycle. The only way to get inside the decision cycle is during pre-acquisition. So in addition to, I want you to imagine for a moment, you use the functionality Nick was just talking about, right? Hey, what is, having, and the best way to ask that question is, I have reviewed the scope and requirements. I have reviewed the statement of work. That being said, from an industry perspective, there are no requirements that driver's license and proof of insurance be, provided in order to execute on this work. What am I missing? What requirements are you asking is going to be under this contract that maybe it didn't get into the scope, and they need to be aware of that. Ask it in that way, right? Hey, we're industry experts. Oh my God! Look. Maybe if I missed it, give me the page number and direct me to it. But this is a really unusual request. That's a part of that relationship between the customer and the industry, right? Or government and industry. Whether it's state, local, municipal, federal, government's a long game, right? Government requires a strategy be put in place with the right tactics and strategies. If you, while, let's say, take Nick's example, you have them, send in a question for you. You can also call them up, and here's the magic phrase: I'm not calling about anything currently in acquisition. I'm not calling about anything currently in acquisition. So, hey, contracting officer, hey, specialist, whatever municipality you're at. Hey, my name's Misty. I'm with XYZ. Just be clear, I'm not calling about anything currently in acquisition. We're thinking about potentially looking at supporting your municipality over the next couple of years. Who runs it? Who's the PM? Who? Collect intel. Because if you say, hey, I see this opportunity, and I have a couple of questions, they're going to go, nope, can't talk to you. Can't talk to you. We're in acquisition phase, right? So one of the most valuable statements is, hey, I'm not calling about anything currently in acquisition. Okay. Use that on the federal side as well. In terms of overstepping authority and ethics, it's been my last response back to you in terms of what you said. You can try. Normally, if they're overstepping authority or they're being unethical on something, they know it. They know it. And so you shining it back in their face is normally going to be, whatever, Misty, don't care. This is what our requirements are. At that point, now, there's nothing wrong with you using the formal Q&A process, right? That's what Nick was just talking about, or going through the system, right? And Nick and his team helping ask the question. But at the end of the day, you can either accept it or you can move to another opportunity. But normally you don't change their minds. Normally. Now, if you tell them they're being unethical, yeah, that can shoot yourself in the foot though, too. So you have to make a hard decision. I have no right answers for that. You just have to follow your own ethical code.
And Misty, you also happen to work in an industry that has a lot of regulation that people working on the procurement side at the government agency just may not be aware of. And you may be alluding to some of that. So, delicately phrasing questions or saying, are you aware that such and such law may bring this into question? that would be a way to do that. And you also had asked about in a chat with us about finding out, let me just see here. So pre-acquisition strategies, besides attending 1 time per year conferences, contracts usually run 2 to 5 years, and most like to stay with the same company. So that goes back to, right, seeing on our site the prior iteration of contract awards. And by the way, this is not just in your state. There are a lot of companies like yours that use our site to market to other government agencies in other states. So I would encourage you to tap into all of that information we have on the prior iteration of the same contracts that you want. And we can talk more about that offline. So before we go to the next topic, I just want to say that we have someone on the line with us, Angel Villanueva. Angel, we'd like to come to you next. But before we do that, I would just like to ask Josh another question that I think he can definitely help us with. So Josh, the question I have for you is, what are the 3 most common challenges that government contractors can focus on to accelerate revenue?
Well, we've already talked 2 of them. So, communicating your value, right? That absolutely number 1, not your socioeconomic status if you're a small. And by the way, communicating your value, I just can't. So RS and federal, right? That's the flag I'm under today. We work with small, but we also work with Fortune corporations, right? I just worked with a Fortune 100. I was literally up on the East Coast last week. They're having challenges communicating their value, right? They are hundreds of billions of dollars. So this is not something unique to small company. It's across all sides. So number 1, communicating your value. Number 2, we already talked about it. 80% of your time. So if we have a quiz, Nick, if we have a quiz, what percent should you spend in pre-acquisition in terms of your overall corporate sales strategy? It's market agnostic, industry agnostic, 80% focus pre-acquisition before the opportunities come out onto the street. So that'd be number 2. And then number 3, knowing how to influence an acquisition, how to ghost requirements, how to get, that's what Misty and we were just talking about with Misty. How do you get inside the decision cycle and influence the decision cycle? Those 3, knowing how to communicate your value, focusing pre-acquisition, and knowing how to influence acquisitions. If you learn those pieces, those are the 3 big ones that I'm always talking to people about.
Well, Josh, thank you for reiterating that content. So, Angel, I would like to invite you to join us. You bring up in the sign-up form, you bring up an interesting idea. So gaining more business, and you made a note about the company structure and ownership. So I would like to, and I'm just showing Josh's website here. And so I'm just going to come back and let's see if I can promote you to a panelist. And so Angel, if you're with us, you should get a prompt there to turn on your audio and video. And again, folks, the video is at your option. I think it makes it more interactive, but at least if we can hear you, that's really the main thing. So we'll give Angel just a moment to get to that prompt. And Josh, before we go further, I wanted to just let the audience know, not just the folks who are with us now, but who may be listening later, that we're really excited about something that actually we announced today here at MyGovWatch.
Was that the M&A?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I just take a moment here and while we decide what to talk about next. And I'm just going to share the press release that we put out. Go to that.
Yeah, by the way, congratulations on that, Nick.
Well, thank you very much. And so we're looking at your website, and let me see if I can hide the Zoom panel here. It's always something.
Can you just share your screen versus a specific app?
Yeah, let me just try that.
So that anything you show will show up to us. I think that'll work. There we go. Yep.
Yep, yep. And so let me close out of a couple things here. There it is. So we announced today that that we have acquired the Rfp database, and the Rfp database has been around for a very long time. It's a system that lets people upload an RFP in the B2B or B2G space, and then use that activity as credit to download another RFP. And so there's something like 160,000 users of that website. And so we're using that opportunity to expose folks who are using MyGovWatch.com to that platform. And then in the other direction, folks that have historically used the RFP database to make them more aware of MyGovWatch.com for access to more government opportunities. And what's also interesting about that acquisition, Josh, is that it came with 2 LinkedIn groups. So there were 2 branded LinkedIn groups, one of which has almost 15,300 members.
Oh, wow.
We rebranded this morning to the RFP Database and Procurement Forum by MyGovWatch.com. So this is something that has become spammy that we're going to turn into a content-oriented group. So you can see the name of that here. And then a second group, if I can get to it. So we're doing something, we rebranded another group that came with the acquisition to be Bid Writing Rants and RFP Gigs. So this is going to be a LinkedIn group where people can talk about different bids that they're working on, or people who are proposal specialists or capture specialists who are interested in commiserating or looking for jobs or looking for freelancing gigs. So that's something that we're promoting also. And it is our first acquisition, so I thought I would share that with the group.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's moving on to bigger and better things. So let me come back to the video and see if we have any hands raised or Q&A. All right, and so thank you, Angel, for that note. It sounds like the reception's not going to work out, but so I'm going to just touch on this because I think we can address it anyway. So Angel had mentioned in the sign-up form that the owner of the company is not an American citizen. And possibly, Josh, and I'm speculating here, that the question comes to whether or not that could affect your marketability in the federal markets. And I know this is a softball, but can you tell us a little bit about what is a small business federally, right? And does it matter if you're an American citizen?
So you don't have to, so a small business is simply defined by codes. That's it. Small business, whether it's either based on a 5-year average of your corporate revenue, right? Average of 5 years of your revenue, yep. Or it's based on number of employees, which is normally manufacturing and similar type of industries. There are plenty of small businesses that are in Poland, that are, that are outside the United States, that are registered in the system for order management, and they are able to sell, right, and win U.S. government contracts. Now, whether or not, it depends on the market. Okay, so Angel, if you're going, well, the intelligence community is likely out. Okay, not completely, right? There's Israeli companies that have certain things, but Angel, your boss will never be able to get certified, right, through any SBA or VA program, whether it's minority or any other type of certification for socioeconomic status. The short answer is yes, you can do it. But really the issue is more perceptual. The issue is going to be how you are perceived by teaming partners, by government buyers. You have to have obviously an office location in the US. Angel, are you, let me ask, can Angel go audio?
Yeah, so we just got a note from Angel that the audio video capabilities now may be available. So I've just promoted Angel to be a co-host or a co-panelist. So okay. I think this is going to work, Josh.
Okay, so Angel, we're still waiting on your microphone to go green. It's gone green. Can you hear me, Angel?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Hey,
Hi.
there we go.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello.
All right. Angel, tell me what does your company sell?
We do staffing nationwide for different industries. Our corporate office is in the Bay Area, and our forte is for IT staffing. But we are certified for the MBE, but through um, the uh, CBUC. Actually, it's the California Public Utilities.
Yep.
Yeah, that one as
So-
an MBE.
So, just remember that state and federal levels have different certification authorities. So and all states have the MBE, right? Minority Business Enterprise, and that's state level. MBE certification doesn't apply at the federal level.
Mhm.
Federal has 8A, right? The minority socially disadvantaged program under the 7J the 7J program managed by SBA. The owner's not going to be able to it won't be able to get 8A certified though, because he's not or she's not a American citizen, right? You should not have, with it being staffing,
Mhm.
you should be able to engage on the federal side. You're just going to be a small business. You likely won't have any other certifications. But here's the thing. If you can't sell to the federal government without those certifications, you're not going to sell to the federal government with those certifications, right? That's the reason why 50% of companies fail, because they're relying on things they shouldn't rely on. Angel, staffing, if you said you're a software development firm, I'd be like, yeah, you're going to have some trouble probably, perceptually, right? But no, you should have no problem positioning in the market. Federal, it's just may take you a little longer than on the state side.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Nick, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that helps, and I think that would be better. That would be. I wouldn't go beyond that. I think that's sufficient.
Nick, I do want to add one more thing for Angel though. Angel, there are a lot of staffing companies that try to break into the federal market, and staffing is really tough. Instead of communicating that you are a staffing firm, you should communicate that you are an IT firm, or you are whatever type of staff, industries that you support. Because I tell staffing companies all the time, don't tell the government you're a staffing company. Tell them you're a government contractor. Tell them that you are an IT, you specialize in IT, but don't tell them you're a staffing company, right? So depending on how hard you want to push into the federal space, or even state and local, you may want to even update your website in terms of how you're branding yourselves. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Angel, thank you so much for joining us, and please hang in there while we get through some of this other stuff. And so, Josh, I want to jump to a question from someone who couldn't make it with us today, but I think it's a topic that we could cover pretty easily, certainly at the federal level. So someone who couldn't join us today had a question, and that is, if I am interested in bidding on federal contracts, but I don't have corporate references, but I have experience myself, can I do that? And how does that work?
That is a great question. Part of our value as a company is the ability to communicate that not only are we experts at what we do, but we also have the experience and past performance. What do we call it? We call it the proof, right? So, companies always ask, especially when we're talking about communicating your value, if you are moving into the federal market or even the state and local market, you use your, if it's the federal market, or if you use any of those, you're going to use your commercial past performance. You're going to use the contracts that you've won on the private sector side, the commercial side. A lot of people will say to me, either I'm a brand new company. I don't have any commercial contracts, government contracts, state, local, federal, or even any commercial contracts. I'm a brand new company. Or, we've been around for a couple of years, but we're still barely winning stuff. When you don't have commercial past performance, you use your individual. How do you think entrepreneurs that open their doors for the first time are able to communicate their past performance? The way that works is whether it's your website, whether it's in a proposal, whether you're talking verbally to somebody, it's in your capability statement, your marketing collateral, whatever it may be. Instead of saying, well, our company has been awarded contracts through these agencies or these corporations. Instead of saying that, you say our management team, right? Even if you're only a one-person company right now, it's always management team. Our management team supported Anheuser-Busch. Our management team provided these products or services to Monsanto or Blue Cross Blue Shield, whatever it may be. You use your individual past performance. That means you can't use everything on the contract, but you can use anything that you personally performed or did yourself, even when you were working for another company. That's how you communicate expertise and past performance when you're brand new.
Excellent summary, Josh, and I would not add to that. And that's why I have you on this session.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So, folks, we don't always necessarily run this exactly to 90 minutes. So I've just put out a chat. So if you folks have additional questions, we can take those. And just before and while you're thinking, if you have any final questions, Josh, there's just one other topic, and this has to do with small businesses collaborating with other small businesses. This is another person who couldn't join us today, but really wanted this question answered. Mm-hmm. What are some of the ways federally that small businesses can interact with one another with the idea of bidding on things together?
Yeah, there are a lot of small companies out there that, they have colleagues at other companies, they have friends. They went to one or two conferences, they met a couple of people, and they do nothing but talk to those folks. And I ask them, I go, how long have you been trying to win work with this company? Oh, 2 years. We've been talking, we met 3 years ago. And I have to always remind them, and I go, what is the definition of insanity? Right? I go, what's insanity? Doing the same thing and expecting different results. We work together as small businesses, right? We work together as small businesses because it makes sense, and it makes, for any given opportunity, it makes us more competitive, right? We don't team with other companies simply to team. We team because it'll make us more competitive. We team because we need to cover down on 100% of the labor categories, right? A lot of small companies, Nick, will go, oh, we can do 70. We have past performance in 70% of this work, right? And we'll just staff the other 30 and we'll grow into it. That's not the way to do it. You want a team where every single bid or proposal you submit says, and hey, government, by the way, we have past performance in 100%. Our team has past performance in 100% of all the requirements that identified with a will or shall within this solicitation. And so you find other small business, this is very important. The most important thing that I recommend to folks is you do not team with any company that is less mature than you. Now, if you think about that for a little bit, it'll make sense from a business perspective, because you want to constantly get better at what you do. You want to improve, right? How you collect intelligence in the market, how you write a bid or write a proposal, how do you review one, how do you do pricing, how do you ensure you're in the competitive zone, right? The competitive range. Well, for everyone that may be brand new to the government space or has only been in a couple of years, do not team with companies, no matter how great they are, Do not team with companies that are less mature than you, because you need to be maturing yourself to be more and more competitive in the market. So, Nick, I'm not sure how much that answers the question. It is critical. Small companies absolutely need to work together, but you only work with other companies when they will make you more competitive and help you win a contract, whether you're prime or sub. But we don't just simply team to team, because when we do, we end up having these relationships where nobody wins, and we spend a lot of time over a number of years. So there, you got to really think strategically about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And for the true newbies who may be with us now or maybe watching later, there are just certain terms of art that Josh mentioned, and you could just look these up easily and just read a little bit about them. So teaming arrangements, so that is a federal term of art, and you can form joint ventures with small businesses. You can have a prime sub relationship with a small business where you're in a teaming arrangement, but you're simply legally a subcontractor. So you can look those up. There's also the mentor protege program. And Josh, I don't know as much about that program as I may have 2 years ago, but it's my recollection that a small business can mentor another small business. Is that correct still, or do you happen to know that?
That's absolutely correct. There's two mentor protege programs. One's run on the SBA side, one's on the DoD side. So there's two MPs, right? You know, but I'll tell you, to have one small mentor another small, that mentor had best have 20, 30, 40 million dollars, right? With great contract success. You know, because you're limited to the number of times you can be a protege. So, and one other thing I want to throw out there, Nick, I often tell companies, you fall into a mentor protege relationship, right? Where another company is mentoring you and bringing you along and helping you make money. But you fall into it. You normally don't go looking for it, because not the only time, but the majority of the time, these larger companies won't bring you on as a protege under the MP program unless they're already making money with you. You've proven that you're going to help them generate revenue. So MP, yeah, crazy valuable program. But first you do the other things that Nick was just talking about, right? Prime subcontract, maybe a JV here and there. But the MP, everybody markets it as being critically important, but nobody looks at it from a business perspective. And that's, you fall into those versus, you know, going straight to them. Make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks for the clarification on that, Josh. We did have one chat question come in. I'm just going to read it, and I'm not sure how we can answer it, or if we can certainly try, and then we can do some digging offline. But Madeline asks, are there federal contracts for conducting studies on healthcare issues such as obesity or hypertension in an area that these diagnoses are widespread?
Short answer, I'm not sure. I do know that there are a lot of grants, right? You said contract. I'm going to guess you also meant possibly grants. There's lots of grants that go out to universities and medical institutions, etc. But you know, I would probably, at least from a data perspective, work with Nick on this, and look at HHS, right? Look at CMS. Look at the healthcare side of the government. And if all else fails, call the small business office for HHS and just ask the question. That's a good question. I don't know the exact answer. I know those studies are being done, whether they're contracts or all grants. I can't tell you. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and Madeline, also, I would add that in addition to what Josh said, you can certainly try to find out from the same sources if there are bundled contracts, you know, where there might be a need for something like that, or that might be a smaller part of a larger contract. So I would allow for that possibility. But certainly if you want to start a conversation offline, we can look into the database at MyGovWatch.com and just see, you know, what sorts of things can we find in the relevant NAICS code or using relevant keyword searches. And certainly if there are things like that out there, you're going to find them on our site. But you may also take an approach that says, let me find what these government agencies are buying that might be similar to that. And that might be your starting point for the pre-acquisition stuff. So if they're not buying that type of thing now, maybe they're buying something similar to it or analogous to it, and you can at least find out who are the powers that be for this if they're not buying this today, if that helps. So we are just under an hour and a half. I do not see any other questions. Josh, I think we did a great job here today. If there's nothing else, I think we can call it a day.
Sounds like a plan. That was a good discussion, and I really appreciate the questions that came from several of the attendees. So, you know, and the last thing I would put on my side is if you all want to connect with me on LinkedIn. I often put out these types of tactics and strategies on my LinkedIn posts. And so, yeah, other than that, Nick, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And for anyone who may be watching this, we're going to make sure that we put a link in the YouTube description to Josh's LinkedIn profile. And also some of the other links you gave us, Josh, we'll make sure we put them in there. And so this should be on YouTube probably in 2 or 3 days. Folks, we appreciate your involvement. The best way to hear about the next session is to have at least a basic edition account on MyGovWatch, which is always free. So if you're not already a subscriber, start your free 14-day trial of mygovwatch.com today also. If you want to win more government contracts for less, you'll be glad you did. And Josh, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Bye-bye.